Since Halloween is coming up, let's talk about horror movies. I have read hundreds of horror scripts. I'm not exaggerating, and I myself wrote a horror script. I'm going to tell you what I have learned from reading all those scripts and writing them. I have it right here in my puppy notebook. This information will help make your script scarier. So one of the first things I learned when transitioning from comedy to horror is how the two are actually somewhat related. Let me explain. The mantra for comedy is faster, funnier. This is something I read somewhere that Barbra Streisand was directing a movie and she kept saying faster, funnier, faster, funnier. And it's true that the faster something is, the more it is funny. So I was used to a really frantic pace because of the comedies I'd been writing. So when I started writing horror, I had things happening so fast, like rah, boo, scare, rah, and it was ridiculous. It was too much. So actually, comedy and horror are kind of like opposites. So the mantra for horror, this is your new mantra, slower, scarier. I found the more I slow things down, the more I could really build. So I would see how much slower can I make it and pull it back and pull it back. Now that does not mean you just postpone what's happening with a bunch of filler, nothing garbage, but there's a reason in horror movies why they have someone slowly creep to the door and then there's a noise and it's a cat and then they redirect and then they're going towards the door again. Slower, scarier. Your new mantra. Another problem I see in a lot of horror movies, half the fun of horror movies is learning the mystery of what is it that's trying to get them? What is it and what does that thing want? So too many horror movies, too many horror scripts, they set too much up in the beginning. They give you the whole story. It's like once upon a time, one of Santa's elves wanted to be Santa Claus, so he got stuck in the chimney and no one heard his cries for help. So now he's mad at all the children and he comes every Christmas and tries to get children. It's like you know everything. So you're just watching like, okay, here, this is what he does, as opposed to holding that information back. And then there's something out there trying to get them and they don't know who, they don't know why. So mystery is your friend. Be very careful about too much setup in the beginning where you explain everything and there's nothing left to learn. This tip goes along with that. The unknown is much scarier than the known. So take, for example, this movie, Hush. Great little movie. If you haven't seen it, great movie. It is about this guy who comes after this girl who actually happens to be deaf. So she is at a disadvantage when dealing with him. Now, in the very beginning, he shows up in this mask. Of course, masks are scary. We know that. Now, one of the problems of the film is they actually have him take off the mask fairly early. So this is a little bit of a spoiler. If you don't want to see it, cover your eyes. But he takes off the mask and he looks like this. To me, he looks like a guy who works at Starbucks. You can look again, take your hands off your eyes. He makes me have warm and fuzzies actually. He makes me think of Frappuccino. I'm not scared. He was scarier when he had a mask and we didn't know who he was. So the unknown, much scarier than the known. And if you can postpone and create mystery, then you've got us completely on the edge of our seat throughout. Here's another big one. You need to establish the tone early on. I've read so many scripts that have the same tired story. It's a group of young people who go out to a house in the woods and somebody slowly chops them up. And why are they there in the woods? They're just there to hang out and have fun. And what do they talk about for like 30 pages? Nothing. Like just chit chat, like, oh my gosh, you know, Bob and Susie are back together. What? I never thought she'd go back together with him. Yeah, they did. Oh my gosh, like for 30 pages. It could be any other type of movie, and then suddenly on page 30, it turns into a horror. It's like a record scratch, like, what? Now it's a horror? So you need a little something in the beginning that establishes the tone. That's why so many horror movies have like the little teaser, and then they continue on from there. Give us the tone. This one is surprising. I'm really shocked and surprised that I see this in horror scripts. But something to know is that light and noise and crowded places are the enemy of horror. Horror does well in the dark, somewhere that's contained, where someone is alone. So I'll read a horror script and they'll have a scene in the middle of the day in a crowded location that is outside with the sun brightly shining, and there's some kind of something or other that shows its face, rah, rah, and you're like, no. No, there's a reason why so many horror movies are contained. You have a single person running from the baddie. That doesn't mean the whole script, the whole story itself is only about one person, but you don't have a whole lot of scenes where you have everybody in the whole scene. You separate out the characters, so you get scenes with characters by themselves. So light and noise and crowds are the enemy of horror. This is a big one too. The devil is boring. In too many scripts, the baddie of the horror movie is Satan. Rah, Satan, rah. And they just assume that the watchers of the movie will be afraid of Satan because he's so bad. Yeah, well, he's also so boring because he's just like generically bad. So it'd be like if you asked someone and they said they were really into music, that they were a musician, and you'd say, oh, what kind of music do you play? Country, pop? They go, oh no, just music. And you're like, rock and roll, death metal? Oh, just music. And you're like, okay, I don't understand. So when the devil is just vaguely bad, and he doesn't necessarily have any strong feelings about anything, because who's gonna cross the devil? He hasn't been crossed by anyone except for maybe God, so he doesn't have any strong animosity towards someone because they can't do anything to him. So he's just running around being vaguely bad. It's just not interesting. You're far better off giving your baddie or evil spirit or whatever it is a personality, to give it feelings, because if it doesn't have strong feelings towards anything, if it doesn't feel anything, we don't really feel anything. So try not to have it be vaguely an evil demon or the devil, because that's boring. Something else that goes along with that, if you can make the whatever it is, the demon or the ghost or the entity, if you can make it somewhat sympathetic, that's going to be more interesting and it's going to be more believable. If you just have some psychopath and they're just crazy and they just like to hurt people and that's it, you don't really feel anything. But if they have a good reason for what they do, if they have been wronged, if something happened to them that was bad, then they're far more interesting. This is kind of the same as any movie. You don't want to paint things so black and white because then it just doesn't feel believable. It's too cartoony. So you don't want the perfect, totally innocent hero and then the super bad because he likes to be bad, evil demon spirit that's gonna get him, because it feels too cartoony. And then we can't invest in the story if it doesn't feel real, it just feels vague. So give your baddie some personality, make them somewhat sympathetic, and then you can also give your lead a little bit of blame if you want to elevate the story and have it not be so cartoony, not be so simple, not just be about interesting choreography. So like Fatal Attraction is a great movie, not necessarily a horror, more like a thriller, but the Michael Douglas character, he was not all great. He's cheating on his wife. He doesn't really care about this woman. He's just thinking about himself. And then he pays the price and she is somewhat sympathetic. And you understand, okay, you can see how she has her feelings hurt and how she wants to get back at him. So when you have something like that, where it's not so black and white. You've got shades going each way, much more interesting. So I hope that helped you write your horror script. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can also find paid and free screenwriting courses on my website, Screenwriting Classes Online. And I will talk to you later.